let's repeat the question. And the question was something blah blah dynamic languages blah blah. So so first of all, let me stop you and say that Groovy doesn't have a dynamic typing. Groovy has an optional typing, which means you can choose whatever you want or not to specify a type. More so, you can force Groovy into check these types, and then you will have Java level type checking, and it will be completely statically and mandatory typed. Okay, now to the question.
Please not agree.
That's a fact. It's kind of hard to disagree with facts.
Can you please explain what it is? What's the difference between dynamic typed language and
Optional type?
Optional typing? Yeah. What do you mean by optional?
Yeah. So but dynamic typing is kind of overloaded term. It can you can think about a lot of things when you say dynamic typing. One of them might be optional typing, right? You can say, okay, what Groovy does is for me dynamic. But I would say dynamic typing is when I specify a variable and then it can change its type during runtime. That I would say dynamic, and you cannot do it in Groovy.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense?
So yeah, that makes sense. So can we say that Scala is optional type too? In this definition, we could say it.
No.
Okay.
Scala is strictly a statically typed language.
Yeah,
I would argue that well, the typical way to define a dynamically typed language is whether or not the compiler has all the type information at a specific point in the code. Like basically, the compiler needs to have everything resolved ahead of time, or you need to fall back to sort of runtime mechanisms like using top types and then doing type checks and type casting at runtime.
Or guessing the types.
Well, guessing the types is just a way for the compiler to supposedly save you a bit of work in that it figures out, it's type inferencing. It figures out the type, but it still happens statically and ahead of time.
Right.
That's a distinction. So a dynamically typed language is often one where the requirements, it's also a spectrum, but the requirement for everything being known and resolved ahead of time is lax.
Yeah, so first, I think that's the moderator job, but I think we should kind of introduce ourselves. I'm clear that I'm talking about Groovy and everybody knows that I'm Baruch, but it might be not that obvious for them.
We already started? I think we're just talking.
Yeah, so let's introduce ourselves.
Do you guys care who we are?
Okay, so I will ask for another one. Do you guys care about what language we represent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, let them guess. Let them guess. No.
For me, it will be complicated.
Yeah. But so after our just introduction presentation, after some explanations, just let us ask you what language do you represent? Something like this. Let's have some fun and create some games.
Okay, so I will say my language is. And then something about the language, and then people should guess.
Yes.
Yeah, let's try that. It won't work with me. I think Tomer got bust. Yeah, Tomer bust already as well. Let's try at least the other guys. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my language supports local type inference, and it runs on JVM, obviously, and is much better than other languages on JVM.
Groovy!
Yeah, and it's not Groovy, definitely. And it's supported by a company, so you can buy commercial support, and which excludes Groovy, obviously.
Type safe?
Sorry?
Are you talking about type safe?
Yeah. How did you get it?
I have no idea what language you're talking about.
Might have been talking about Kotlin or C.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think they're backed up by the company.
Red Hat.
No, they don't. Yeah, it's like pet project of Gavin King. I don't think the Red Hat has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I guess so. So you know that I'm in favor of Scala, and now I decided to devote all my time, all my business time in 2015 for Scala only, just to prove that Scala is good at what I'm thinking it's good at, or it's bad, so I should ditch it right away.
So you try to compile ASCII art.
Yes,
and it works for you.
Yeah, because that's the language for this.
Yeah.
By the way, about type safe, do you know that type safe renames
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
change its name.
To everyone that hates Java and Java EE and this kind of stuff, and Scala, this kind of stuff name.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty long name.
Well,
TypeSafe wasn't much shorter,
yeah.
and it didn't mean any sense.
My language provides switch keys on steroids called pattern matching.
Pascal.
ML.
Pascal.
Yeah, it's JVM language, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
What was it? Scala. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Scala groupie. That's a nice fun.
Well, I can.
And Kotlin somewhere there.
I think we just made our case. We can all go home now.
I don't see how it relates. The reason that I'm here alone against all of you speaks in favor of groupie because Scala is so weak. You need 4 guys for that.
Yes, I can easily represent Clojure because I started my journey into functional programming with Clojure, and there is a reason. I stopped doing Clojure.
Then you can represent them.
Yeah, but then I can nicely talk about this language. So I can probably convince you to use Clojure than Scala because I believe that Clojure is much simpler and is doing its job very well.
Okay,
Then
I want to stop you here. Anyone saw the code of Clojure? It's like braces all the way, and it's much simpler than Scala. Figure out how complicated Scala is. Thank you very much.
He's right.
You just, I think you just envious because you don't have those, not
Parentheses.
parentheses.
Yeah,
So
Come to the Groovy Puzzlers tomorrow. I will show you the importance of parentheses.
So
No, really, all of you Scala guys?
Apparently.
Actually, I want to say that this situation shows the actual market. I mean that Scala is the most popular JVM language right now.
In this area of the world.
Let's ask people, who is developing on Scala today? Who is developing on Java?
That's the most popular alternative language for the JVM.
Who is developing on Groovy?
Groovy.
Groovy and Scala more or less the same.
Yeah.
Kotlin? Why you are here? You are the only Kotlin developer in the world.
So Clojure. Let's get a real feel of things. Does anyone use Clojure?
Does anybody know what Clojure is?
Just for pet projects.
JavaScript, Ceylon.
Ceylon?
Ceylon? Gavenkin, where is Gavenkin? He's the only one in the world. Yeah, so what else? Jython? How about Jython? JRuby?
JavaScript.
Nashorn? Yeah, that's a valid language. Okay, so yeah. So
Just because it looks like Groovy, it doesn't make it great.
That's right, because nothing is as great as Groovy, even if it look alike. Good point. So guys, let's, any questions, really, about
Anything.
anything?
Well, if I'm more interested in Scala than in Groovy, sorry Mark, but I have to speak the truth.
And the
Since
question.
when do you have to speak the truth?
Well, I have to. Sometimes.
someone has to tell you the truth. So it's him.
Okay, so the fact that Victor is more interested in Scala, that's a significant argument.
Yes,
I think I
for
might
Scala.
switch. Yeah.
No, but
Or no.
the question is, do you know, guys, where actually Scala will be at in year 2, 3 years? So we know about Java 9 and probably plans for Java 10, but I haven't heard much about plans on developing or improving Scala in any direction.
Well, simple then, question. Do you know what the name will be?
Who want to
Can
answer?
you answer that? Or
Yeah.
I can as well.
The first thing is about Scala is stabilizing for production and making more interesting for big companies and so on. It means that Scala should develop, create less features, new features I mean. So it's kind of Java-like style to develop a language. so not to break compatibility, but this means that for company less risks to use this language, because otherwise they start to use language, and after 1 year they need to completely rewrite their code just to compile with new compiler.
Scala, you know,
And
that's how it works.
how it worked actually. So nowadays everything changed, and I think that they're working in this direction still working to develop language with better compatibility, and they always think about it. And the second major thing is probably not about 3 years, but probably about 5 years, is about .T language, the next generation of Scala. So it will be the point when some kind of compatibility will be broken significantly. But still this language will be much more precise and less complicated like Scala.
Which way?
The type system will be much more simplified. So currently Scala type system is some kind of things which
Hell.
almost
The word that you look is hell.
Yes. I mean that probably only 3 people in the world know everything about Scala type system.
That's a great reference.
So this is kind of things will be fixed in the next generation of Scala language.
No, I'm
And
scared to
this is not some kind of this is new language. So these 2 languages will be developed separately, but they will have very similar syntax.
Keep talking, you're doing a great job.
Wow, you paid him, right?
To put things a little bit in perspective, if only so that Bo has less ammunition. So yeah, I mean, the thing about Scala is up until a few years ago, up until the nowadays pretty old, like 4 years old, version 2.9, Scala was notoriously bad at maintaining backwards compatibility in general. Since then, it's actually been significantly improved, migrating a pretty substantial code base across major versions of Scala between 2.9, 2.10, 2.11 is not a huge undertaking. I've done that a few times, even wrote a few blog posts on that. It's not that big a deal. It's still more troublesome than you'd like. Like, people coming from a Java background are used to an incredibly high degree of backwards compatibility and stability in the platform. And it took Java some 20 years to get to that point, whereas Scala's only been around for 10. So it's pretty easy to make fun of Scala for not adhering to the same standard that a language with a huge company like Oracle is backing, and that has had 20 years to mature. So in practical terms, what is going to happen in the Scala space in the next couple of years is a lot of work, less around adding, as Alexander said, less around adding language features, but more around making sure that the tool chain and the ecosystem are really stable across releases. And there's been a lot of work done around that in the last couple of years, and it's very noticeable if you're sort of a long time in the Scala space. You shouldn't expect any sort of major, world turning new features in Scala in the next couple of years, but more a lot of work around the infrastructure to make sure that things remain backwards compatible and stable. I think it's a good thing because Scala has already got to the point where it's feature-rich enough to confuse people in many ways. I don't think it's nearly as bad as Alexander said, including the type system. It's a very powerful type system. I don't think it's complicated to the point where normal humans can't figure it out, because I don't think I'm that smart. And
maybe you didn't figure it out.
I didn't figure all of it out because there's a lot to figure out, but in order to actually get your work done, even if your work is writing very highly abstract and generic libraries, you can get by without knowing all of the nooks and crannies of the type system. But the long-term work they're doing is both around technical sort of backwards compatibility and also, as Alexander mentioned, DOTI, which is sort of a reimagining of the Scala type system with more sort of unified abstractions, less corner cases, less confusion, more kind of identity between different features that nowadays are considered separate. This is a long-term thing. The effect on the average Scala programmer, even in 5 years, is going to be negligible, I think. It's mostly to do with the internal kind of core infrastructure of the thing. Java has managed to remain stable for a very long time because it's so damn simple. Scala is trying to regain some of that simplicity in order to be a more stable platform. I think it's a good thing. It's a sign of maturity. Whatever Baruch has to say notwithstanding. Baruch, what do you have to say?
Well, I have a question to you.
Yeah, now I will speak.
Yeah.
Actually, the same question about Groovy future, and also I can say that I watched the Groovy Puzzlers presentation.
And you don't want to see Groovy anymore in your life?
Not actually, but I can say what opinion I've made of it. Well, you see, Java Puzzlers.
You should come here if you are going to answer.
No.
Okay.
For me, all the examples in the book Java Puzzlers are based on the lack of knowledge about Java, well, JLS and so on, about different corner cases. And the Groovy Puzzlers I saw, for me, some of the examples are more based on the bugs that actually are there. And so,
okay.
Will this be fixed or something like that?
All right. Okay, so there was actually two questions, and I will start with
Waiting for the mic.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Two questions here, one about the future of Groovy and the other is about our talk, the Groovy Puzzlers. Whoever saw it is pretty scared from what they saw about Groovy and what they can conclude, and the problem is ours. We didn't have enough disclaimers, okay, in the beginning of this talk. Now, really, because this is a fun talk, and we do it for the sake of fun, and usually you won't see this kind of code that we show, and you won't do those things that we do only to make you entertained. For 2 seasons of Groovy Puzzlers, which means around 25 puzzlers, we only showed 2 bugs, which is not a lot.
One of them already fixed.
Yeah, and one of them is already fixed, right? So that's about it. And we really, we scare people by showing the puzzling side of Groovy, but actually it's not there. It's just for fun. Regarding the future, of course, much more serious question. And as you probably heard, Pivotal, which was the company behind Groovy, stopped supporting Groovy and Grails and fired the guys that were working full-time job on Groovy and Grails.
Can you explain the reason, maybe?
Yeah, so no one knows the reason. And the Pivotal guys, they have no idea as well. Josh Wong is here, he's a developer advocate at Pivotal, he knows what's going on, and when we asked him why, he said, that was a very bad idea, we don't know why. Anyhow, that's history. There are no good side in that. But the more optimistic part of it is that Groovy was always very, very community driven. Even in the years when there are people working, actually 6 people, working full-time job on Groovy and Grails, there was significantly more contribution and significantly more commits from the community than from those guys inside. So the pace will definitely go slower. And Groovy important features like the meta object protocol, the next version of it, which will be the foundation of Groovy 3. that probably won't come out anytime soon. We're entering kind of a stabilization phase, bugs are fixed, new minor features are implemented by the community, but a significant job as rewriting the major object protocol, we don't know where it will happen. So we believe that probably in some point of time, some company will pick up a sponsorship and will hire guys to work full-time job on Groovy, but there is not the situation now. Groovy is an Apache project now. It doesn't mean that it's going to die or something, because probably you can name a couple of successful Apache projects. For example, Apache, thank you very much. The other example is Tomcat as well. Apache are fine, the language will be there, contributions will come, but of course we are a little bit of sad about what happened, and it will be slower than before.
So no production in big companies?
Yeah, so there are huge companies with Groovy in production. I think I can... I think I can give a couple of names. For example, Netflix or Target. They're, the retail chain in the United States, the biggest one.
So TransferWise?
TransferWise, also a huge company. How many people do they have?
What made them think that?
60 developers.
Yeah, so that's pretty big. JFrog, of course, we're heavily committed into Groovy and Grails. And there are really big guys out there working on Groovy, and I believe that in some point of time, that when it will be in danger, some of them will definitely pick them up. Gradle, of course, it's another example of a product being heavily invested in Groovy, etc., etc.
Do we know why did they pick Groovy over other languages based on JVM?
Yeah, so the story of Groovy, it's very simple. It's like half-a-minute pitch that I think every Groovy developer can tell you why Groovy.
Okay.
So from what we see as Groovy developers is that Groovy has almost all the features of other alternative JVM languages. It can be fully static, it can be optional, like dynamically typed. It has metaprogramming both in runtime and compile time. It can be fully object-oriented, much more than Java. It can be fully functional, like the other functional languages on the JVA. It has any kind of a feature that a modern language should have, and so as Scala, for example, right? And it has a very big advantage of being very, very similar to Java syntax-wise. Okay, so it got the best of all the other languages, plus it's very, very close to Java. And it's not only the learning curve, which is very, very short, because people already know Java, can understand Groovy right away, and write Groovy right away. It only matters a lot when it comes to interoperability with Java. Inheritance mix, etc., etc. It's much more easier when the syntax is almost the same. Okay?
Thank you.
It's very subjective questions, and it's more to Scala guys and to Scala community. I am mediocre SBT and Gradle user, and comparison to SBT, Gradle is much more flexible.
Are you saying that Gradle is more flexible than SBT?
Yes, as for me.
Okay.
It's subjective. Disclaimer was subjective. So, a question to Scala guys. For me, as for the plain user, SBT very complex and unreadable for me. Sorry.
Okay,
Could you please all Scala guys explain honestly what do you think about SBT comparison to Gradle, for example, but without emotional influence, because it's very interesting for me as for.
Okay, to be honest, just a disclaimer. I'm a huge fan of SBT. Just to prove that how.
Now it will be totally objective.
Yeah. So I'm objective. Yeah, obviously. So to prove my objectiveness, just look at Stack Overflow at hashtag SBT, and you will see me, as a main contributor to the questions about SBT. So So to me, SBT is not complex. I know that SBT can be seen as a complex tool because SBT, my point of view of SBT is that SBT is ahead of its time. It means that you can code in SBT as if you were coding a full-blown application. But then, think about it. You are not coding an application, enterprise application or whatever. You are coding your build system. And then, guess what? I'm pretty sure that any developer I would ask about doing anything significant in build system, and my question would, if the question would be, do you care about build system, and would you improve it if you had more time to devote for build system? I'm pretty sure that the majority of respondents would say, I don't care about builds unless they are slow.
Or broken.
Or broken, yeah. And I disagree. I believe that truly automated and working and fully tested builds are as important as the code we are developing using this build.
So that was great pitch for Gradle, actually.
Yeah. So the difference between Gradle and SBT. First of all, in Gradle there is no incremental compilation. There is no yet incremental compilation for Groovy for any language that Gradle supports.
SBT for Scala for Java has incremental compilation.
No, because SBT is not for Java specifically.
I must disagree because, for example, as a Java developer trying to play with Java play framework for Java, and I have to use SBT as a system.
Yeah.
And you just said that SBT support incremental compilation for Scala, but not for Java. So it's not very kind for other, but in other case,
for Java, yes.
Yes, but in other case, such a build system as Gradle will support Scala, Java, JavaScript, and C++. So.
Okay, so there is no.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, so to be honest, there is no incremental compilation in Gradle, right? Okay, so I'm saying in Gradle.
It's incubating.
Sorry?
Yeah, it's
incubating.
Yeah, but there is no yet.
No, you can use it. So it's incubating. So
okay, and
you can use it, but you should be aware of potential issues with incremental compilation. But
it's there.
Okay,
it's there.
So it's there. So they did it in Gradle because they saw that there's support for incremental compilation in SBT. That's why I told you that SBT is ahead of its time. So that's the point of SBT, that might seem complex because it offers too many features for developers who don't really care about how to code truly automated builds. We seem to be convinced that this is a job for DevOps or people who care more about infrastructure or something like this, and we call them these poor people, DevOps, and they probably don't want to do this, but we said, okay, now it's your job. Now it's your job to automate our system, build systems, and guess what? We are throwing at them Gradle and SBT, and we insist on them using Ruby or Scala or whatever language, and say, now you need to be a full-time developer, full-time infrastructure guru, and all this stuff. And I'm saying, stop it. So I devoted my time to understand SBT, and I can sell you whatever it means. SBT, even to you that seem to be unconvinced at the moment to SBT, in 15 minutes. And I'm pretty sure that I would show SBT in a way that's way ahead of what you can find in in the docs and in SBT, in Stack Overflow. Because at Stack Overflow, I can find many answers that answer the problem, but it doesn't give insights on why this answer works for a given problem. And that's what I hate.
have a question for you.
Yeah, and so SBT, you can code SBT as if it were an application, but it requires a lot of Scala expertise. So this Scala expertise might impede SBT adoption, which is not simple So
I have a question for you because I don't know SBT enough. I just know how to configure to work without factory inventory. My question is, so you mentioned that you need to know Groovy for write Gradle scripts, and I would disagree because what you need to know is Gradle DSL. It might look a lot.
Same story.
No, so
Same story. It's
so my question is, do you have to really know Scala to write SBT?
Yeah.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yeah, go ahead. In some sense, yeah.
Scala internals.
Not even internals, because in Gradle you write DSL. You don't need to know Groovy.
Yes.
So the question is, do you need to know Scala to write SBT?
So the answer, the trivial answer is no. You don't need to know Scala to write an SBT script.
But then you don't use
Hold on a
SBT.
second. There's two parts that I want to weigh in on your answer to that question. So first off, right off the bat, do you need to know Scala to use SBT? No. Presumably, if you use SBT, you're using Scala anyway, because otherwise you probably won't even get to the point where you're actually seriously considering this.
Here's an example with play.
I suppose there are, I suppose there are exceptions to that rule. Pretty much you're the first one I've ever run into, but you know.
Garrett?
So, do you need to know Scala? No. It really depends on the complexity of your build. Now, I would say that really there's two kind of dimensions here. First of all, SBT is not a new project, unlike what a lot of people think. What happened was that for a number of years, SBT was unfortunately called Simple Build Tool, and at that point it was anything but simple. It had a very complicated syntax for configuration. It was very poorly documented, and that went on for quite a few years. Over the last couple of years, since Josh Sareth from the TypeSafe team took over, basically sort of maintaining the project, it's made incredible headway. So nowadays, if you have a fairly straightforward build setup for your project, it's actually dead simple to configure it in SBT. You don't need to know any Scala. Nowadays, you don't hardly need to know anything. You can basically set up a trivial build in SBT in 2 minutes with 3 lines of code. That's a DSL. It doesn't even look like Scala. When the complexity increases, as it obviously will for a big enough project. If you're working for an enterprise and you have a big enterprise software, you're gonna end up with a massively complex build system, and that's irrespective of which tool you end up using. It was true for Ant, it's true for Maven, it's slightly less true, but still true for Gradle, of all of these tools I'm least familiar with, by the way, so that's full disclosure. I contrast to Jacek, I'm not a huge SBT fan. For me, it's a tool. I've run into sort of the same scale of issues with SBT as I've ran into with Maven or with Ant back in the day. It's all a question of complexity. You end up running into complexity issues with any build system. Nothing's perfect. I think what SBT does that's interesting is that it has a very well-defined abstraction for what a project is and how to configure it and how to structure it. And up until fairly recently, it was really badly documented. So yes, is SBT hard to use? Up until 2 years ago, I would have said it's incredibly hard to use, don't use it. Nowadays, I would say that if you have a reasonable sized project or a library, it's dead simple, and beyond that scale, it's gonna be hell whichever tool you use. I don't know anyone who has a sufficiently complicated project that does not spend at least a week out of every year cursing whatever build tool they ended up picking, and that includes Gradle, of which Mr. Baruch here is a huge fan.
No, but that's completely true.
So complexity is everywhere. It's a question of flavor. If you use Scala, like if you've made the conscious choice to use Scala, you probably should use SBT because it has a lot of advantages for Scala. It's a lot simpler to configure for Scala project or mixed Java and Scala projects. I'm actually surprised about that comment with SBT not supporting incremental compilation for Java because at least
It was my mistake to say it explicitly. It does support Java,
Yeah.
but to me it's of no choice.
Yeah,
I'm not using Java. I'm not using mixed Java.
So I actually do, and to my knowledge, it does support incremental compilation for Java. But even if it didn't, the fact of the matter is, why is incremental compilation even a big deal? Because Java is a really, really simple language to parse and compile, whereas Scala is a horrendous language to parse and compile comparative to Java. It's way easier than C++, but it's a lot more complex than Java. So the compilation time actually matters. That's why you need incremental compilation. So for Scala projects, SBT makes a lot of sense. For projects that are not in Scala, that are in Java or any of the other JVM languages, maybe. I'm not sure that it's inherently better or worse than Gradle. It's probably more suitable for some things and less for others. But nowadays, it's a pretty kind of sensible choice, whereas 2 years ago, it was just a hideous mess. Most projects I use nowadays actually do use SBT, but my company actually still relies on trusted and true Maven, which we curse at least 1 week out of every year.
That's all, 1 week, I would say, out of every month.
I said at least.
What about you and you guys about this? Because the question was to the Scala guys.
Yeah, let's make it short. As for me, we recently moved to SBT. We're probably one of the first team in JetBrains which moved to any build tool. I mean dependency management build tool. Build tool with dependency management. All other teams works some kind of jars in VCS and so on. So it's a real headache. And because of that, it was really complicated task to use build tool with dependency management to depend on IntelliJ IDEA which don't use dependency management. So and SBT helped us to resolve this task, and we did it. It required few hacks and few not simple things to implement that. But it was finally done, and now we can just change version of IntelliJ IDEA in our build script, and then we depend on another version of IntelliJ IDEA. And I would say, I don't know about Gradle and if it's possible to implement the same thing in Gradle. But I can say that it's possible. It was possible in SBT, and it's really great. And I love it.
Well, in my project, in my company, we use both Java and Scala, and we use both SBT and Maven. And well, my impression about SBT is it's completely different DSL, so it might be scary. But after you look well and become more confident with it tool, well, everything seems quite logical and pretty straightforward. But anyway, for projects with both Java and Scala, we prefer to use Maven. Well, that's all. So actually, in our company, we have one wizard who knows everything about SBT, and if somebody doesn't know, well, maybe he is one of the wizards that could resolve all the questions. And as far as SBT, well, as far as build configuration doesn't change frequently, we just well, pass all those tasks to that wizard. That's all. But it's quite important to have that guy, because if you don't know SBT, it's easy to shoot your leg.
As with everything else. You had a question before?
Oh yeah. So I was going to ask people originally. Obviously, you are all advocates or fans of some language in particular. Without saying a complete cop-out answer like "there's nothing wrong with it at all," what would you say the kind of biggest drawback is of the language which you kind of support or advocate?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a really good question. And speaking about Groovy, once you came to Groovy Puzzlers, you know all the drawbacks. On a serious matter for us, the biggest concern now is the pivotal issue, and the reason that we do believe for the best, and we do trust Apache and the community to do a good job, but it's a transitional moment, and it's very scary. On the language level itself, there are, of course, quite a bunch of problems that we hope to see solved in the next version of Groovy, and again, it's unclear when it's going to happen. For example, the meta object protocol, and that's this proxy that all the calls inside Groovy, unless this proxy is turned off, are passing through, and this is the proxy that does all the magic of the dynamic dispatch and all the runtime metaprogramming. It could get some job done on it, which means thrash it over and write a new one, and hopefully it will happen sometime. Up until then,
performance? Or?
Yeah, so there are performance, there are not things that cannot be implemented with the current meta object protocol, and it's quite an old thing. The current meta object protocol was written 12 years ago, and since then we learned a lot. Scala came in, we learned a lot from Scala, and we need to thrash it over, and it's not clear when it's going to be done. Who's talking for Scala? You can fight. You can fight.
Each of us. Yeah, just let it pass.
Okay. So in terms of Scala, there's two sort of fundamental issues with Scala that I can point to. The obvious issue with Scala that everyone notices when they start working with Scala is really, really long compilation times. Now, I'm not going to bother you with why that is, but the bottom line is, yes, compiling Scala is an order of magnitude at least slower than compiling Java, typically 2 orders of magnitude. And that is an issue. That is why SBT does incremental compilation. That is why certain language features are, if you look them up on the internet, you'll find sort of use with care warnings on them in terms of the effect on compilation speed. That's an issue, and it's gonna end up being less of an issue as computers get faster and faster and compilers get more parallel and do better in analysis and
just throw more hardware on it. It will solve it.
Yes, inevitably it will, but not for the foreseeable future. So right now it can still be annoying for large enough code bases. The second issue with Scala is actually, I perceive to be an issue with any of the languages that we might discuss here, with the possible exception of Groovy, even though I'm not convinced. And that's being a fairly new language, there's actually very little sort of accepted or common wisdom around what to do and what not to do. So if you go into a Scala, into a Java code base nowadays, you'd have a pretty good idea of the things that you should and should not do, what the patterns are, what the anti-patterns are, because there's 20 years of collected wisdom there. And you'd know not to use, say, synchronized collections, because they're insane. But I mean, nowadays you don't have to think about whether or not you should be using them because it's obvious. So that's just a stupid example off the top of my head, but there's a lot of sort of accepted wisdom around how to write sort of modern, sensible Java code.
But what about lambdas and streams and whatever?
Yeah, so lambdas and streams introduce the opportunity for new patterns or new anti-patterns to be added to that common wisdom. My point is that Scala had not had the sort of long run that Java has, and so it does not have nearly the same kind of corpus of patterns, anti-patterns, recommendations, do's and don'ts, and that sort of thing. What that leads to is that a lot of people that are new to the language sort of go down the rabbit hole into pretty advanced either type system features or various language features, and run into corner cases where, if they had the prior knowledge, you should probably not touch, existentials in Scala until you've had a half a year or more of Scala under your belt. If they know that, they wouldn't go down that rabbit hole. So that's also an issue. I would perceive that to be an issue probably with Groovy as well, certainly with Ceylon, Kotlin, any new language. It was true of Python 10 years ago as well. So yeah, those are two of the biggest issues nowadays.
Okay, this is the last answer because we're running out of time.
From my perspective, I would say that IDE for Scala is not as perfect as for Java, and for some people who care about it, it can be a problem. So, but I'm working for that, and our team is working. Probably the same, but I'm not responsible for Groovy in ideas. So,
sorry to interject. I just wanted to say that I've been working with his products for the last 4 years. I think we're on the right side of the Pareto divide nowadays. The 80% is there. Nowadays, it's only people who are sticklers to it has to work perfectly and are used to Java grade quality of tools. They're the ones with complaints. The others are pretty happy.
So, just minor remark about Scala, the last one. Well, there are a lot of hidden implicit mechanisms in Scala, so it might seem pretty straightforward, like you write no public static void main and a lot of difficult words that could seem scaring for newbies. But from another side, there are a lot of implicit mechanisms, and these can cause a lot of puzzlers, like
let's do Scala puzzlers.
But yeah, Scala puzzlers. Yeah, a lot of cases when your expectations are wrong. So even if Scala is static typed, you get not what you want, and also Scala has not so meaningful messages because of it's quite complicated, and it cannot describe you, for example,
error
compilation.
Messages?
Yeah,
error messages.
Yeah, error messages. So it shows you some tricky message about some implicits or something else, and you don't understand what's exactly happening. And for example, recently Scala has fixed the problem that if you don't type :unit when you define the function, previously it was a compilation or error with huge descriptions that some unknown words, and nobody could understand what's going on. And that was really Stack Overflow development driven development. Yeah. So
that's finish. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.